Hello and welcome to this episode of the Australian Business Podcast. I'm Owen Rask. This podcast series is your field guide to growing and scaling your business. Whether you're just starting out or you're years into it and ready to exit. Your field guides, Zara McGuffey, Daniel Golubev, Jordan Kiddis, and myself are here to support you on your journey. Through these episodes, you will get inspiration from other business owners, get expert Q&A on the technical specifics and how that impacts you, and just hear from a community of like-minded individuals. If you like this episode, we would be so grateful if you shared it with a friend or a family member that may be running a business of their own. Let's get into today's episode.
Welcome to this episode of the Australian Business Podcast. I'm Gemma Mitchell, usually the host of the Australian Finance Podcast, but today I'm stepping in to host this episode on the Business Podcast with a very special guest. Today I'm joined by Cedar Andeson. He is the founder and CEO of Flow Hive. We're here to talk about how his backyard idea turned into a global innovation and a worldwide success that's changed the honey industry forever. In this episode, we talk about bringing ideas to life, scaling and sustaining that growth. Let's dive in.
Thank you very much for having me, Gemma.
Excited to have you here. The team has been very, very keen to hear your story. So we are popping over to the Business Podcast to hear all about the incredible journey that you've had. But I've already shared with you, I was a little bit disappointed that you didn't paraglide into this podcast episode. You set the bar pretty high when it was at Tim Reed's podcast.
That's right. I managed to take off from my place. I thought I would impress, right? Taking off from my place, flying over and landing right when Tim arrived to do his podcast at our Flow Hive office. And jumped out of my paraglider and he said, "Oh yeah, I see you guys all the time. I live on Mount Tambourine." And I was like, "Oh, gee, what are the chances?"
You're like, you could at least pretend to be a little bit impressed. Well, we should have actually made this one in person because I'm only just up the road at the Sunshine Coast. So we could have absolutely did that, but I would not be paragliding under no circumstances.
Fair enough. It's not for everyone, but it's definitely one of my passions.
That and bees, which is what we're here to talk about today. So you have been around. So for those who aren't aware of Flow Hive, it's an incredible story and it's something that we're going to get into today. We're going to look at from the concept of how it started all the way up to crowdfunding, capital raising, all of that type of stuff, and then on to what's next for this empire that you've built. But tell us a bit about what life was like growing up for you and when you kind of had this idea that there has to be a better way.
So I come from a family where beekeeping was pretty much just what you did. You kept a few hives in your backyard and you harvested the honey when it was ready and you looked after the bees. And that was just part of, I guess, living a life where you grew vegetables and had a garden and so on. And so my grandfather kept bees near Canberra, a place called Queanbeyan. And I distinctly remember those flavours of the honey there when I was a child. The yellow box honey was just such a strong flavour that whenever I taste that flavour, I'm instantly teleported back to that moment of chewing on that comb of the yellow box honey.
That's so nice, that nostalgic feeling. So did I read that you're a sixth generation bee? Is that right?
Or perhaps not six, but once you start including my children, and perhaps if you go back beyond my grandfather, I don't know whether you could call him a beekeeper. He used to wildcraft honey by the old pillow sack method, where you brave the stings and you'd stick a pillow sack over all the comb in a hive that you've ripped out of a tree or something, and squeeze all the honey out that way. But of course, that decimates the colony. So I'm not sure if it's a beekeeper.
It's something to do with bees anyway, but it sounds great to say sixth generation. So where did the idea come from for Flow Hive? And is this something that you had been, like the concept of this, was there many different types of prototypes that you were kind of working with for a little while? Tell us about what the product is today and how it kind of started.
So it came from me harvesting the honey in the conventional way. So in my early 20s, I had a backyard apiary that I'd scaled up to 40 hives. And that meant selling the honey to the local shops by the bucketful and harvesting in the conventional way. So for those that don't know what that's like, basically you get in your bee suit, you fire up your smoker, you go, and first of all you lift the hives to see if they're heavy or not yet, and then you open the hive, you take out the frames, you brush off all the bees, then you take those frames to a processing shed, which happened to be the one that I lived in. And then the frames have to be decapped with a hot knife, and you've got this bench set up and you're cutting the wax capping off all of the frames, and then those frames go into a centrifuge, which is like a glorified washing machine, and all the honey spins out, hits the stainless steel walls of the extractor and goes down to the bottom, and then it's a process of sieving and filtering and settling that to get to your product to sell. And if that's not enough hard work, all of those frames have to go back into those same hives again. So it's a lot of heavy, sweaty, messy, hard work. And it's from that place when, hang on, there has to be a better way than this. Can't we just tap it out while the bees are doing their thing? And that's what started a decade-long journey that my father joined in on. And we eventually got there with the first working prototype.
That is amazing. So how does the system work now? For those who have no idea about beekeeping, what you've just said is more than I've ever known about beekeeping and extracting honey. So how does it look now?
So now we're harvesting in a completely new way, where with our Flow Hive invention, you can walk up to your hive and you've got what looks like a really long Allen key. You put that into the back of the hive and you turn it a bit like a big tap, and then the honey flows right out into your jar, bypassing all of that conventional processing and all of that equipment that you don't need to buy anymore, and all of that space in your shed and all of the big sticky mess. It's just all contained to a small footprint being the size of a beehive, and you can just fill up your jars. And that's what the invention does. It's a whole extracting room built right into your hive with a turn tap method of harvesting.
That is quite the innovation. It's a long way from what it sounds like it was initially. So does this mean that the bees are completely undistracted by this? And I'm assuming then less bee stings.
Yeah, absolutely. So the conventional way, there's no doubt about it, you end up with bees everywhere. They're all over the ground. You're walking across them as you transfer your frames to your truck and so on. And yeah, I can definitely confidently say you harm less bees extracting with our Flow Hive invention. But of course, beekeeping does require looking after your bees and getting in there and inspecting those brood frames. So you do need to open the hive for those brood inspections, which actually becomes a beautiful and often quite addictive for people, a pastime that they can enjoy with their family. That's getting in there and watching how the bees are progressing, making sure they've got a queen that's laying well, and all of the things you do as a beekeeper.
So it becomes more about taking care of them, and that's purely the focus than all like the labor that comes with getting the honey at the end of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's only when we look after our bees that we get that amazing reward of honey, where often they store more than they need and we can share some too.
Yeah, amazing. And I feel like the last few years, or probably longer, there has been this real awareness of how important bees are to our economy, to life. Like, are you, and you're a big advocate for this kind of stuff. You guys do a lot around this awareness piece. For people that might not know, can you give us a quick rundown on just how important bees are?
So if you look at the supermarket shelf, 1/3 of those food types are directly pollinated by bees. So if we lose the European honeybee, Apis mellifera, which is the species that humans have taken all around the world wherever we go because they're such extreme little pollinators, like a strong hive can pollinate 50 million flowers in a day. So that's going out, visiting a bunch of flowers, coming back. But when you times that by 50,000 bees, it really adds up. So that pollination power is a really important part of our whole agricultural system. And it's not only that, it goes beyond pollinating our specific foods. But once we lose pollinators, then our whole system starts to unravel. So it is really important for us to have enough beekeepers, for us to look after our bees, not only the European honeybees that we really have integrated with our food system, but also all of the native bee species and pollinating insects and animals, because it's a super important part of the whole matrix of life that we all depend on.
Yes. And you've just made this much, much easier. So you were saying that it's been around a decade. It was about a decade between kind of prototypes to get this to where you wanted it to be. Was this a passion project? Did you see it becoming a business, and did you ever imagine it to grow to this phase, or was it more for, your personal enjoyment and what you were doing? And sounds like you had a little side hustle kind of happening from quite young with selling honey.
Yeah, look, I was someone who never really wanted to go down the conventional job path. And that meant, you're living on $50 at a time, but you don't care because you're paragliding around the sky, getting the odd job for Greenpeace where you're flying over the burning jungles of Sumatra, photographing the illegal burning or whatever it is. And it's just kind of thing to thing. And money was never really an issue, but never really a focus. And when it came to inventing, I guess I'm an incredibly optimistic type. So it's pretty quick that in my head I'm spiraling out of control about how well things are going to go. Mm-hmm. And, naively, in that euphoric moment of watching the first honey in the world come out of the hive, we sat back and said, what next? Where do we go from here?
So you saw it working. You're very optimistic. You're obviously very intelligent to be able to be such a creator. And from there, you were kind of thinking this could be something big.
So we sat back there in the grass, just wondering what to do. Where do we go from here? We've made this invention work, and now what? And it's then, I guess, we were thinking about beekeeping in the world, how many hives there are in the world, and we're like, wow, what if we could even reach 1%? And it's a naive way to look at it, but it did really get the thinking caps on of how far we could go with an invention. But of course, we could just be two deluded inventors whiling away the years with an invention that nobody wants. So we still were unsure about the path forward.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's like a lot of business owners, right? You're thinking, and business owners, inventors, you're thinking, now what? And also excited about what the potential is, but really scared that delusion might be creeping in and you might be a little bit blinded by it. So you have to have a lot of courage to be able to kind of go, no, we believe in this and we're going to see what we can do. What was the next step? Was it from that moment that you went into crowdfunding? Were you kind of funding things for yourself? Where do you go after you have an idea for an invention? You've made it work. You've seen how amazing it is. Like, what is actually the next step?
So I guess my father and I didn't have a dollar to our name. And I grew up on a community here on the Northern Rivers where definitely business was the evil of the world. And I still believe that, but I've also learnt there's great businesses as well. And so we didn't have business knowledge behind us, and we also didn't have money behind us. So we were like begging and borrowing off family just to get the next little step done, which was, $2,000, a lot of money at the time, to do a bunch of 3D printing to start testing some of our prototypes on a further scale. Before that, it was, the craft knife and a shed full of tools and so on. So my father and I certainly, we were both running our utes off old vegetable oil we'd get from behind the chip shop and that kind of character.
So good. So did the people around you believe in this as much as you did? Did you have to do a bit of convincing, or was everybody kind of feeling just as optimistic as you were?
It's a funny thing, inventing, because there's all of these rules in place where if you publish your invention anywhere, you cannot get your patent. So you must make sure your patent comes first. So what that means is you're keeping things completely under wraps, and even, and that's the tightest struggle with that is from your family. So it became this effort where you definitely feel like a paranoid inventor then. You're going, hey, look, this is quite serious. You can't actually show that picture to anybody and so on. And they're going, oh, really? Okay. And
yeah, that's crazy, because you would want to share and show like how proud you are. And I don't think a lot of people would know that step, how important that getting that part right is.
And there's lots of different ways to take things to the world. Of course, you might choose an open source direction, but in this case, we chose to do patents because that would allow us theoretically 20 years to then be the leader in the market with that product and hold the keys to it in a way. So that's the direction we chose to go, which meant really working hard on that side of it, keeping it under wraps. And then we started really canvassing the world about what we should do next. So we went and we met with the guy who wrote the book on business in Australia. We went and met with previous successful inventors. And I kept coming to this idea of crowdfunding, particularly because we didn't have any funds. And I also didn't want to do what others suggested, and that was to give away the lion's shares of the shares and therefore potentially lose control. And I wanted to make sure this was seen in the best light in the world and that I had the ability to be there with its journey and make sure that if there was issues, I could speak to that and problem solve. And I didn't want some other entity to have control over the invention. So all of this pointed us back in the direction of crowdfunding. And I'd been following at the time this thing called a glyph, which was simply a little clip for your phone. I thought, that's so smart. They got all the orders first before they even tooled up to make the molds. And that took all the risk out of, having a pile of product that nobody ever wanted and so on. And so we went along to a crowdfunding workshop hosted by a successful local inventor. And they had Australia's best case there speaking on a panel, and they said, no, don't do it. It won't work. Crowdfunding's for widgets and gizmos. Not, this agricultural thing with bees, And I walked away from that and went, stuff it. We're going to do it anyway. And I guess that's another important ingredient, is following what you think's going to work and being really stubborn.
Yeah, absolutely. Because a lot of people would, take that and be like, okay, well, now we've got to find another way. But knowing that, that optimism coming through again and believing in your product so much. So how did you set the target initially for what you wanted to crowdfund, and where did that actually reach?
So we set it at $70,000, which was the legitimate no-go amount that we thought, if we get less than that, then it's not worth making injection molds, which are expensive. That was really quite naive looking back in terms of what it really costs to employ people and so on for a start to help. So anyway, we set that target at 70,000 Australian dollars, and we dropped our first video on Facebook after putting in a bit of effort to getting some promoted posts and building up a little audience that we really were hoping to launch to somebody instead of no one, right? And I'd roped in a couple of friends at the time, one who had some experience in that space and another that was helping with the website design, and also my sister who was doing video work with us. And what happened next was extraordinary. We dropped that video onto Facebook and it got 1 million views overnight. And we had 70,000 emails on our list a week later when it came time to launch. So after staying up all night, finishing off the crowdfunding page, actually not a wink of sleep, we pressed go on the crowdfunding. We put some effort in. We had the ABC there, and we're there in Canberra, of all places, on my grandfather's balcony with his hives. And there's actually a TV shot of me picking up the phone and walking straight out of the ABC interview because we'd hit target. And there's people jumping around in the background going, you've hit target. And you've sold out. And it's like, oh, quick, on the laptop, make more, delivery times and so on. And that day it just ramped. 2 hours later, we were the fastest crowdfunding campaign in the world to reach $1 million. That's $1 million US.
And you had set it at 70,000.
We'd set it at 70,000.
That is amazing. At this point, are you thinking, we're definitely not delusional. This thing's got legs.
It was definitely euphoric. And my family's jumping around in the background going, shut it down, you've got enough sales. And I'm there going, hey, hang on. Isn't this what dreams are made of? No, we're keeping this going. We'll work out production later.
Yeah.
And away we went. The next day we broke another crowdfunding record, the fastest to 3 million, and so on. And we just kept going with, and then 8 weeks and a baby later, we topped out at 12.2 million US of pre-orders of our Flow Hive.
How do you, that is just so incredible. And I can imagine you were just on cloud 9. But what do you actually do then? How do you sit with that and go, wow, now we've got to get all of this out? Did you scale very quickly, get, all the people that you needed? What were the next steps after realizing the commitment now that you had, but you also had all of the funding?
The team grew very quickly. Friends were hiring friends, and luckily I had so many talented friends and family. Like even my grandfather was pitching in, uncles, everyone just writing, because sorry for all of those we didn't get back to, but we were overloaded, thousands of emails every day. And our team grew to 40 overnight, and we're still about that size actually.
That's amazing. So are you able to sustain it? It wasn't like a full burst and then you had to let people go. Like, have there been ebbs and flows in the business that have been like challenging that came from that? Or has it been pretty smooth sailing since then? I don't know if any business story is smooth sailing, but.
Well, it was an incredible start, which certainly gave us the funds to get up and going. And luckily we priced it good enough to cover all of our costs, because of course we hadn't made the Flow Hives yet. And we had very ambitious goals from a sustainability perspective, that we wanted to manufacture in major countries all at once, to save on shipping miles and all of that. Mm-hmm. And so we went as fast as we can, and the team, bless them, worked so hard in order to achieve what was pretty extraordinary, and that's a crowdfunding campaign that actually delivered on time. So 3 months was the first deliveries, and we had to make the product, ship it to 130 different countries, and that was a complete nightmare, really.
I'm just thinking of all the logistics to get this off the ground. Were you, at this stage before you did the crowdfunding, were you in a position that you knew where you were manufacturing, how the price point, like getting all of those, your ducks in a row is really challenging? Were you at that stage where you were like, cool, now let's just roll it out? Or were you scrambling to actually get those processes in place?
So the price point was set the day before crowdfunding, I think, and the page was finished, actually not quite finished. We were still trying to finish it. We were late to launch because we didn't have the PayPal set up, all of that stuff. No is the answer. We didn't have it organized to that level. We had, at the core of our invention, we had already injection molded parts and had tested them in multiple countries. So we had a small production tool, and what we needed to do was scale up. So we produced, for the injection molding, bigger tools made right here in Brisbane, and we wanted to be Australian made. So I was pretty surprised, but we managed to get a 24/7 production line happening right here in Australia. And innovatively, we did all sorts of wild things to speed up time and buy back time. like building big dehumidification tents over the injection molding machines so we could get 2 seconds faster on the cycle time, so we could deliver 20% earlier. All of this mad stuff, and even like air freighting hives to people to make sure they weren't late. We were doing well, we were delivering, and we had hive bodies made in America, we had frames made in Australia, and they would meet a customer anywhere in the world, and that was a logistical nightmare. But we had some great people on the team to work all of that out. Flow Hive stuck in customs in every little corner of the globe and so on. And it was quite amazing that we managed to deliver on time all the way up into Christmas, and we got a lot of the hives under the tree for people, but a bunch we didn't, and that's where we started to feel the first bits of pain with disappointed customers.
Yes. So that was going to be one of my questions. After all of this, well, I don't know if it has settled down, but after you got through this enormous kind of growth period, got these orders and things out, did you reflect back and kind of think, all right, this is how we can change things? Are things pretty much similar now, or were there a lot of learnings that came out of that and a lot of improvements?
Look, there were a lot of learnings. We were completely naive, so we contacted DHL, went, where can we ship to? And they said anywhere, so we opened it up to the whole world. But of course, there's even countries that are sanctioned and so on. So, if we were to pass on a learning there, it would be to say, on your initial crowdfunding, focus on the major markets and don't try and do the whole world, because you definitely spend a lot of time in places you don't need to and so on. But, it was an important thing, I guess, to approach it with that naivety as well, because many people wouldn't start if they knew what was ahead, I guess.
I think that is a very, very good point, because a lot of the time we can just get so in our head about all of the things. And we see it, with investors, we see it with people buying their first home, all of these different things, and absolute businesses. When you think too much about all of it and don't get started, ideas can kind of die in that space, or they could go the way that yours has gone, which is amazing. So it was very important to you about the sustainability aspect of the business, and you have a lot of initiatives and things around that. So can you talk to us about how that part fits into the business?
I guess growing up with a very environmental upbringing, going to protests, my family was there at the first successful forest blockade in the world here in Terrania in the Northern Rivers. And from that space, looking after the world that we all completely depend on becomes a natural bent, I guess. And in the crowdfunding, we realized, wow, we've got an audience. How can we leverage this to do something positive? And at the time, in the middle of the crowdfunding, we had Vanuatu getting smashed by a cyclone. $5 raffle tickets for the first Flow Hive. We raised $100,000 in 3 days and were able to donate that. We thought, wow, that's great. A month later, we had Nepal's earthquakes, and we did the same thing. And so that's when we realized, wow, this is the power of having an audience, having, I guess, the keys to a business, or even an influential person in a business can really make change in the world fast. And from there we decided, let's just focus on what the bees need, because of course if you spread yourself too thin, you're here, there and everywhere. So we've narrowed it down to things that are good for bees. So that becomes habitat and advocacy for pollinators, and supporting programs that support pollinators. So we started off with a pollinator house, which was turning a problem into a solution. We had a lot of waste timber, offcuts of flow hives and so on. And we put together little pollinator houses for native bees, a little project, a little educational project for families. And we donated all of the revenue to grassroots projects to support pollinators. And that was an incredible amount of work, even though we felt good about this whole microgrants program. It was like, wow, we're trying to run a business and this is really starting to take up space. So we changed tactics a little bit to supporting bigger initiatives, and we actually still run that particular initiative. But since then, we've scaled up and we now run an educational side of the company, which is doing beekeeping education, an online course, and you've made that one a 50% of profits donated. And that does a whole lot of great things because it brings the beekeeping world together. It really helps educate those people that want an online sequential course in high quality video training content. And it's an amazing fundraiser as well. So I've donated $1.5 million and partnered with organizations all over the world, worked with reforestation projects, 1.5 million trees now planted, and a lot of habitat protected, and a lot of great organizations to support pollinators who have supported also.
It is absolutely like crazy. It's mind-blowing the scale that you're able to do things on, like from where it's grown. It's absolutely so inspiring. I think a lot of the time people think that if they are going to have sustainable practices or be doing good, that it has to be at the detriment to profit and different things. But you're obviously showing a clear way that you can make it work, and learning along the way that sometimes you can overcommit and it can be a lot when you're trying to run a huge business as well.
Yeah, I think people have that sort of idea that you've got blood, sweat and tears, your hard-earned profits. It's hard to give them away, right? So I think putting the strategy head on, it's great to look at it not like that, but say, what can we do that's an ad? And in doing so, donate part or all of that to great causes. And that way, it's not a takeaway, it's an ad.
It's an ad, yeah.
And in doing so, you will also open up networks that didn't exist before, and that will be helpful for your business and so on. So I think it's a great strategy.
Yeah, it can absolutely snowball, and it's getting you more visibility as well. And as long as you've got your pricing right and the right people around you, I can see that, yeah, it would absolutely help you grow. So what is next for Flow Hive?
So at the moment, we've got quite a serious thing in Australia where varroa mite, these little mites that about, if you were a bee, they'd be about the size of the rabbit, and sucking on your body. And they came into Newcastle a couple of years ago, and they're slowly spreading out. So I'm focusing very heavily on inventions to help that space, because we need some help to be able to support our honeybee populations in non-chemical ways. The rest of the world's been dealing with it for a long time. It's not the end of the world. You can easily treat them. But what I want to do is create inventions that treat them in better ways.
So what does that process look like? I imagine you study what other countries are doing, take the good, the bad, the learnings, and then see how you can apply it?
Absolutely. And we've got a small team here working hard. I was running experiments overnight. I was up at 3 a.m. researching. I was in the apiary at 6 a.m. It's, I don't know, it's a character type, I guess, just to go hard till you find a solution.
Yes. Well, I have absolutely no doubt that you will, just given the incredible story that has been this growth. So what you said, is it the team's still about 40 at the moment?
Yeah, and that's spread between an office team and also a factory team, because we have all of our flow hives are made here in Australia. So we've got our laser cutting happening here in the Shire, with sunbeams landing on the roof, turning into laser beams, cutting out our wood. We're boxing them up. We've got the injection molding happening up the road. We fill containers. We ship out to major warehouses around the world, so that when people order on our website, it'll post out nice and quick.
Yeah, great. It sounds like a very well-oiled machine at this stage, but lots of improvements along the way. If you could leave our audience, so our people either running businesses, keen to start something, got an idea and just not sure where to kind of start, what would be your biggest kind of lesson that you'd like to pass on to somebody who wants to launch their next big thing?
I would say just follow what you think is going to work and pursue it. Make sure you are steering away from those people that are trying to cut you down and focusing on what you think is going to be achievable. And that means being optimistic about what you're trying to achieve. And that means really looking at it and making sure you are, of course, checking and bouncing off feedback as you get closer from people that might be in the market you're in. But at the same time, if you are creating something truly new, then there's only one way to go, and that is to try.
I love that. And there's a saying around, the more no's you get, the closer you are to your yes. But yes, it is very hard for people to imagine a way of doing different things when they don't have that inventor mindset. So I think that's a really good takeaway, that you just need to try it. And it sounds like crowdfunding is a great way to test that as well, the buy-in and the passion, and get, people behind you that are seeing your vision and believing in it.
Absolutely. If you make a great crowdfunding video, which is the important part, then you'll know pretty quickly whether anyone in the world is interested.
Whether it's got legs or not. Absolutely love it. Well, we are so excited to follow on with the journey. Where is it best for people to connect with you guys?
Have a look at honeyflow.com, or it's .com.au here in Australia. And there you can see what it's all about, see how it all works, and find out a wealth of information about beekeeping. If you would like to start beekeeping, whether it's in your backyard or on your balcony or on your rooftop in the city, it's an amazing pastime. Warning, it can be quite addictive, and it does give you this beautiful produce that absolutely everyone loves. So a great gift to keep your neighbours sweet.
I love that. Well, I will link in the show notes more information, those websites. But Cedar, it's just been amazing chatting to you. This has been so inspiring. And I know our community on the business podcast is absolutely going to love all of the takeaways and hearing about your journey.
Thanks for having me, Gemma.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Australian Business Podcast. If you want to work with us in a more structured way, or you just want to get some of those great resources we mentioned, you can follow the link to go to the Australian Business Podcast landing page, where you'll find resources for every episode, as well as a full catalogue and links to resources that are frequently mentioned on the program. We include resources like courses and materials and workbooks that you can download and use to improve your business. Thanks again for listening to this episode of the Australian Business Podcast. Thanks for watching this episode of the podcast. If you want to hear more from us, you can get daily videos and podcasts on Rask's YouTube channel. Or if you want to enroll in a free course on investing, property, business, money, you name it, you can join over 34,000 other students and enroll in a free course on the Rask website. Simply head to www.rask.com.au and follow the prompts. Thanks for watching this Rask podcast.